Welcome to episode number 2 of Behind the Ball. I don't think there's probably a bigger conversation to talk about right now than 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶. Do you want to get us started?
Yeah. I'll happily start talking about the greatest player on the planet at this moment in time. England's Player of the Year, Player of the Month, the Premier League. Well, I mean, it'll obviously be Chelsea's Player of the Month. I think 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶 is he's simply fantastic. I continuously run out of words to describe him. He's putting in Hazard-esque levels of kind of what do we do? Give the ball to Palmer, but there feels almost like there's a more of an inevitability about Palmer, because at the moment, as things stand, Palmer is averaging a goal contribution for Chelsea a game at least. And I mean, I don't from an outsider's point of view, I don't know how you feel, but I genuinely think if England had won the Euros, Palmer would be in the top 3 conversation for the Ballon d'Or.
Yeah, I mean, he's fantastic. I love 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶. He makes me want to watch football. It makes me want to watch Chelsea as well as that. But yeah, he's just so good. I mean, anytime he gets on the ball, you think something might happen, whether that's out wide, inside, even coming in a lot deeper. Obviously, he can spray. I think he's got some of the most accurate long ball percentages in the world, not only just the Premier League as well. So he can certainly come in and affect play from not just up front or, towards the front of the pitch, but from up further back a little bit as well, almost like that quarterback role. I think he is better when he's further forward, though, just because he's such a goal threat.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as he's in the final third, he looks to shoot, which is just a massive breath of fresh air almost, because a lot of players, although they get into those areas, they don't necessarily always look towards goal. They don't want to have the responsibility of possibly giving the ball away, but he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like, he'll quite happily shoot from 30 yards, 3 yards, 10 yards. It just doesn't matter. I think that's what's so good about him is, as you say, there's that inevitability of something's going to happen at some point. We just have to wait. I think the only couple of things which take away perhaps from the Ballon d'Or shouts that have been put up by you is probably the fact that he is playing for Chelsea still. Didn't have obviously some of the success that a lot of the other players on that list might have, like a Rodri, obviously won the Euros, won the Premier League. That does a lot more for the Ballon d'Or than goals and assists do, sadly.
Yeah.
I think 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶 is definitely in the shouts. Obviously, as you say, Player of the Month this month, England's Player of the Year. I think that one's slightly controversial because he didn't really play for England too much, but I think that's more of I think it was voted for by the fans.
No, it's voted by the players.
Is it? Oh my God. Wow, that's even more of a boost to him.
It just tells, I mean, in my head, it tells you his level. Like, you've got the best players in the country collectively saying that he's been the best player this year, and kind of going off your inevitability thing and kind of the fact he doesn't really care about pressure. Like, doesn't start a single game at the Euros, which is a stick he's been beaten with to why he shouldn't have the men's Player of the Year. But one of his first touches in the final is he shoots from outside the box and whips into the bottom corner, brings England straight back into the game. And that's the sort of thing I mean. Comes on against the Netherlands, gets the assist. Palmer makes teams tick and he makes players better, which, I mean, I personally think that's a trait that you don't find in a lot of footballers.
No, and I think it just feels like everyone wants to be around him. Everyone wants to play with him as well. I think if we see him score at Chelsea, everyone runs over towards him. They want to be around him. They want to touch him, those sort of things. I think it's those little details that when they're there, you kind of see that, like, this guy's really special. And there's no bigger compliment than obviously your peers saying that you are the best as well. The fact that they didn't vote for Foden, who won obviously the PFA Player of the Year. In fact, obviously 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶 did win Young Player of the Year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're looking at someone really special. And I think certainly if he keeps up his level doing what he's doing, he might get options outside of Chelsea coming for him quite quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really want to think about that. But kind of, if a team did come in for him, it would have to be like 200 million. Like, if you were to buy a Mbappe, if you were to buy a Vinicius Jr., if you were to buy a Rodri, I mean, Rodri would be cheaper because of his position, but players of that ilk, kind of, if you think about when PSG signed Neymar. I mean, yes, it was from Barcelona, but it cost them nearly 200 million quid. And so to prize someone like that away from a club, it would almost be impossible. It would have to be like a completely immoral amount of money and especially with the way the market's going, it could arguably be more than 200.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at someone who could potentially, obviously, be the most expensive player ever. If someone was to go for him and he was to keep up his levels, there's no reason as to why that couldn't be more than a Neymar figure. I hope it's not, just because I don't like players going for that much money, regardless.
I hope it's not, because he's never leaving Chelsea.
Yeah, there we go. But I just hope he can keep it up for England's sake, for his sake. I love watching him play. I love his interviews as well. I think he's brilliant. I think he's almost... He's not got the biggest personality in the sense of he does all these interviews and he speaks really well, like a 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶. But like, I feel as though the fact that he's a little bit more... He's got a wall up of he doesn't want to give too much away. But it just comes across so well as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I could watch 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶 content all day long if I wanted to. I think most people kind of feel the same way. The only thing I'm slightly interested is when things start to go a little bit wrong. Obviously, we haven't seen that at any point in his career so far. How would he respond to everything not going completely right with him so far?
I don't know if I agree with that, because I mean, if you look at the Chelsea team that he came into, it was an absolute mess. All the reports, people are having to sit on the floor, like things like that. That's not an easy. It's not an easy environment to come into. 45 million quid, having played less than 10 games in the Premier League. I don't know if he'd started. I can't remember if he'd started for City in the Premier League. And then for a large majority of the season, we were sitting in 10th, and he was still coming up with goals, assists. He was carrying the team on his back with kind of seemingly no complaints and seemingly with relative ease. And so I don't know if it's fair to say for things to go wrong. I mean, I guess kind of he's never been like in a bad spell of form. Yeah,
that's more what I was getting at, is from like a personal perspective. I think that's one of the things that pushed 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶 into one of those, is he one of the best players in the league conversations quite early, was the fact that he was doing it at a Chelsea side where you say there was so many issues behind the scenes. I think there was obviously instances where players were taking the ball off for the penalties, had a bit of problems with 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶 at some points as well. So I think that obviously puts him in good stead. But I was more talking from like a personal form perspective.
Yeah.
If he goes 5, let's say even, dare I say 10 games without a goal, then what happens? Because we've seen a couple of players do it for a season and a half. It's quite hard to do it for 2, especially more than 2 as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what happens this season nonetheless with him. But I genuinely think there's no problems. I think this is someone who's going to go right to the very top of the game.
Kind of one more point of kind of what more does he have to do to be kind of unanimously considered the best player in the world. I think it was quite interesting. I can't remember where he said it, but Jamie Carragher said Palmer doesn't need to improve to be the best player in the world. He just needs to keep ticking along doing what he's doing. And I think that's a really interesting thought, because kind of a lot of people have always, you think, how do they become the best player in the world? They need to improve. Whereas there's a lot to be said for consistency. A lot of people say the best ability is availability. Kind of, if you're able to keep that level for so long, say that's Palmer's level here. There might be a player that kind of like waves up and higher but peaks slower. If you can keep that level, I think that says a lot for being the best player in the world. Yeah,
I think we saw it with Salah a couple of years ago as well. He started the season fabulously, and then people started saying, well, is he the best in the world? And some people say yes, just because there's a bank of evidence which suggests that he really is, because you go, okay, season 1 did well, season 2 did well, season 3 did well. And there's, as I say, there's that bank of like, you can't deny that. And I think that's the only thing that Palmer has right now, is some people say that obviously Haaland's the best in the league. He's got 2 or 3 seasons in the Premier League now of goals. And then obviously behind that as well, he's got Champions League performances for Dortmund, unbelievable goals at Dortmund as well. And I think that's the sort of like pushing factor towards as to why those players obviously get the best in the world shouts a lot earlier than Palmer has done so far, or a lot louder than Palmer has so far. on Ten Hag, I don't think he can be. He's not going to be United's answer going forward. Whether they think that that's the next 2 years or the next 5 years, or even by the end of the international break, we'll find out. But I don't think we're looking at someone who's going to take them to the next level by any means necessary, really.
No, I actually thought they would have probably sacked him sooner.
Yeah, I think they might keep him for maybe even the rest of this season. Actually, I think that we've seen that there's not that much availability for managers outside of the Premier League. There's not really the top manager kind of like pool, if you will, isn't that large right now. I don't have a list of names that they can go, well, he's available and he's available and he's available. What are the pros and cons? I think it's more of they'd be getting rid of him just to end this now and kind of stop the form, get a new manager bounce, whoever that may be, might be an interim one. But I think the problems with Ten Hag just come from the fact that there's no positives of Ten Hag that I can see anymore. I think people were saying you got to give him time. You got to give him time with his players, especially. Wait till he's had a window. It came and went, wasn't successful. We've seen a wave of players fall out with him, with that Ronaldo, Sancho. There seems to be a lot of disruption there, and even now we're seeing it with Van Nistelrooy, things like that. Little tiffs going on the side. That always happens, but because it's Man United and because it's Ten Hag, it becomes a massive story and becomes more than what it should. And I think that's a United problem, not necessarily a Ten Hag issue. But I think the lack of, I don't want to say passion, because I think that's very harsh, but I think the lack of ability to kind of control some of the outside circumstances is causing a lot of problems at United. And I don't think that will be solved by a new manager, whoever that may be. Who do you reckon it could be?
I think if you're looking at, I think if you're Jim Radcliffe, you look at Pochettino and go, that would have been probably the ideal. That would have been the one we wanted. But I mean, he'll be in the American job until the World Cup. I mean, I don't imagine Pochettino will stay at the American job after the World Cup there. So I mean, if you really want, you could stick it out with Ten Hag for that long. But I mean, the other main options, I'd say Gareth Southgate, and then kind of the one that's kind of been rumoured in kind of the news and the press, because he's got the Sir Alex seal of approval, is Allegri. For Man United fans, they'd see Southgate's the worst option. Just kind of his style of football is quite boring, and Allegri, I think it's a risk. Kind of, he's never played outside of Italy. Sorry, he's never managed outside of Italy, and kind of, yes, he's won a lot of cups, won a lot of leagues, but with clubs like Juventus and Serie A, it's kind of, if you're at a top club, it's not that competitive. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts?
I genuinely don't know, and that's because I genuinely don't really understand the United transfer policy, what they're trying to build with Ten Hag. I don't think Southgate's the answer for United. I think that would only lead to a worse situation than they're in now. I think Allegri's an interesting one because, as you say, he's got the Sir Alex seal of approval, which worked so well last time. But as you say, no experience outside of Italy. And there seems to be a bit of a tax with other managers coming in to the Premier League as well. And I'm not sure it'd be the perfect setup. But that being said, I think United are in a very difficult position right now. I don't think there is the perfect manager waiting for them to get in. Like Liverpool kind of were able to go, Jurgen Klopp's free.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get him. And that led to obviously a period of mass success. And I think kind of Man City kind of had the same thing where Pep Guardiola's free.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll build on that. I don't think there's that situation right now for United. And I think that's kind of, you'll be very disappointed if you're a United fan, because the option of getting rid of Ten Hag seems like the obvious one right now, I'd say. But at the same time, if you get rid of him, I think they're only going to go into more of a period of limbo right now. I think at the end of the season, maybe in January, where more things will change around, like Europe, obviously. I think that would be definitely the better time to change it then, opposed to now, where going into the Christmas period, which is just hectic anyway. I don't think adding a new manager to that will gain United anything, so to speak. But I mean, it's their worst start to the league ever. I mean, if that's not a reason to get rid of a manager, I don't really know what is.
I mean, you could argue another reason to get rid of the manager is the two worst starts to the season was your current manager's first season and then this season. But I agree. I think Man United are in a tricky situation because this team is built up of Ten Hag's players. Kind of, this is everyone he wanted. This is supposed to be like, right, we're ticking now, and they're absolutely not. They're playing horrendously. And then Allegri as well. Allegri feels a bit like just bringing another sort of Ten Hag, like kind of has it. It's his way, and it's all this, and it's all that, and it's kind of. I feel like with an Allegri, you might find yourself in this same position 2 or 3 years down the line.
Yeah, I think a lot of Man United fans, I'd say, are hesitant to get rid of Ten Hag because there's kind of that evidence of, well, it worked for Arsenal when they stuck with their manager and it didn't look great. But I think it didn't. There was constant improvement. A lot of people alluded to it, of like the style of play. Arsenal were getting beaten, but there was signs of there is something.
You could
here.
see what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and Arteta cleared out a wave of players from old and brought in obviously his own players, and then it obviously the evidence is it worked. They've climbed up the table. Although there was obviously challenging periods at the start, they're obviously in a very fruitful place now. I just don't see that happening with Ten Hag. I think a couple of his signings have had a season or two now to get used to it. It doesn't look like they're going to get used to it anytime soon. That would be a bit of a blow to United now if they were to get rid of him, because they're obviously getting rid of the manager who's brought in essentially the new squad and pretty much all of the players in it.
You've got Man United down in the dumps. One team that's kind of loving life at the moment, Aston Villa. More specifically, John Duran. I think his start to this season and kind of the end to this season has been, quite frankly, incredible. He's just got himself a new contract. What have you made of him?
Yeah, I love John Duran. I think he's quietly been a superstar in the making, and people haven't just realised, are only starting to realise it now. He's scored a lot of goals from the bench. He's come on and made a significant impact. Hopefully he starts to start soon as well, but obviously he can't because Ollie Watkins has just been that good for the last season and a half, if not longer than that as well. But he's only 20 years old. He came from the MLS. He was the youngest ever foreign signing in MLS history. I mean, if that doesn't say something about the type of player that he is, then I don't know what does as well. Obviously, recently signed a new contract that takes him to 2030 at Aston Villa as well, which obviously shows that he is going to be there for the future, possibly starting soon, you'd like to think, especially after the goal in the Champions League to beat Bayern Munich. I mean, there's no bigger stage than that. Yeah. No bigger goal than that either. Yeah. Scoring against Neuer, for goodness sake. I mean,
chipping him from...
Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't put you in contention to start, I genuinely don't know what does. A couple other things to bear in mind is he also was performing off the bench last season as well. Rescued a point at Villa Park, scoring a brace against Liverpool. That put them in the Champions League places at the end of the season, undoubtedly. Scored against City as well. So, no, we are looking at someone who's not just hit the ground running this season and scored a couple of banging goals and is going to fade away. No, this is someone who's here to stay. Maybe not at Aston Villa, probably now, but he's definitely here to stay in English football, and someone who's going to be at the top of the game.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think kind of where he kind of ends up will be really interesting, whether he stays at Aston Villa. I often find when a player... Aston Villa is not a small club, but when a player's playing really well and playing for a slightly smaller club, which kind of Villa are now, they're coming back up to being better. It often makes me think, kind of, has there been a release clause inserted in there? Kind of look at what Villa did with Grealish. He signed an extension, and then it was a 100 million release clause for a club that was in the Champions League if Villa weren't in the Champions League. And so it wouldn't surprise me if something like that had been inserted. But also, if there hasn't been, Chelsea agreed a £40 million deal with Villa for Duran at the start in summer, and it fell through because Gallagher didn't want to go to Villa. But if they were selling him for 40 million at the start of the season, I mean, are we looking at an 80, 90, 100 million pound striker now, kind of just with the form that he's in? Yeah,
I think his transfer value right now would definitely suggest that. I mean, it's got to be. If you look at what some of the other strikers have gone for, that's such a credit to John Duran as well, but just because he hasn't really started for Villa at all, yet his transfer value is all the way up here. He's just signed a new contract, which will undoubtedly put him on a bit more money, which gives him a bit more security as well. I genuinely don't see any reason why this guy can't be one of the best strikers in the league going forward, especially. I think Villa are going to certainly kick on, started really well in the Champions League as well. I think we could be looking at a club that potentially comes into the top 6 and potentially adds another one to become the top 7 clubs in English football. I think the top 6 is waiting for someone to come along and knock one of those clubs either off, whether you see someone like a Spurs go down slightly, or whether you see just Aston Villa become such a big entity that they enter themselves into the conversation and becomes a top 7. So no, I definitely think that it's a really good future for him. I think other clubs also recognise him as one of the most up and coming prospects in world football as well. As you say, only 20 years old still. I mean, that's unbelievable for anyone scoring a goal in the Champions League, let alone the winner.
I mean, kind of, Villa have got themselves a bit of a situation here, because you've got Watkins, who isn't old by any kind of stretch of the imagination. He's 28, and so he's kind of, I think, in the next couple of years, he'll be looking for kind of that final big contract, and so he might not have any intention of leaving Villa, which then leaves them in quite a tricky scenario, because they'd be well within their rights to go, well, John Duran is 8 years younger than you. He's scoring at the same rate. Yes, we'd get more money for him, but his value to us is greater. Potentially they'd rather get 50, 60 for Watkins now and keep Duran, or then lose Duran for 90, keeping Watkins, but then they've got, in 4 or 5 years' time, they've got to go hunting for another striker. So I think it's really interesting. I think 90 million, if someone came in with 90 million, I think it's too much money to turn down, because what that can do for like the rest of the team as well. So I think I'd be very surprised if in the next 2 years, if John Duran hadn't moved on to a different club.
Yeah, and I think the only reason that we're seeing that Ollie Watkins starts over him, or has started over him, despite him obviously scoring a lot from the bench, is just due to Emery and the fact that he's such a tactician. He just won't change. He won't change the fact that Ollie Watkins has obviously been a consistent performer no matter what. And I don't think he's actually better than Ollie Watkins yet, by any means, just yet as well. I think obviously it's great scoring from the bench, but you obviously need to start and score as well, although he might not have been given the starts to be able to do that. But no, I think Watkins is definitely going to be Villa's striker going forward for this season. It'll just be whether next season might Ollie Watkins get a little bit frustrated. I mean, it's not got to be a great feeling for him knowing that he's in the best form of his life, scoring the most goals at the club, and it doesn't feel like his name's solidified completely in the starting 11 now. But I think it's a great period for Aston Villa, and I actually hope it continues as well. I think it's great having another club up there tussling for Champions League places. Yeah, making Europe things interesting as well. Yeah, I think it's boring when it's just the same 4 going through, or definitely the same top 6, if you will. Yeah, I think with obviously Leicester in previous years were up there competing. I think it's great that now that we've got Aston Villa as well, because you don't want to see it where it's a Bundesliga where any team or any club who's got a player who's playing well just immediately gets poached by one of the top sides. I think that's quite boring. So as long as we can see him, I'm hoping he stays at Aston Villa. I'm hoping Ollie Watkins stays as well. And I'm hoping that Emery can somehow figure out a way to have both of them playing. Yeah, I mean, if not both of them rotating. It's a headache for Emery, but it's got to be a great headache to have.
Yes, I mean, if Emery can work out a way to get them both playing together and both on the form that they're on, like you're looking at a strike partnership for the decade. Well, not for the decades, but a strike partnership that could carry you to titles. Like Villa could become a very serious threat if you've got 2 strikers scoring 20 goals a season.
And one of the better ones in the league as well, because there's not too many out-and-out strikers in the Premier League right now at the very top, other than I can only think of Watkins or Haaland. And obviously there's a couple of Isak as well. Isak had a very good season last year as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think you're certainly seeing right now where a lot of the top 6 clubs are really searching for that person who's going to lead the line. And I think Villa have got to be quite careful that they don't lose both of them by trying to just keep both of them happy as well.
They could find themselves in a situation where they try and keep them both, and then they both go, no, I can't stay anymore. I want to leave. And then that's a nightmare.
Yeah, no, exactly. So be interesting to see what goes on no matter what. Eh?
Yeah, 100%. And moving on to our last topic of the day, Pogba's had his ban reduced to 18 months, and it's looking like him and Juventus are going to agree to terminate the contract. And so lastly, I just wanted to know, where would you like to see Pogba go next? Because he is such a talent.
Yeah, I think he should probably go back to France in some capacity. I think it'd be great to see him at a PSG where he could become, obviously his commercial value is so high. I think he could definitely walk into that kind of what feels like a bit of a vacuum that's happened at PSG. Obviously Neymar and Mbappe leaving. You know, they like a superstar. Surely there's no one better than Pogba. He's French as well.
Yeah.
Kind of works for all parties. I think the other club that I've seen a lot of talk about is also Marseille. I think that could also be quite a good move for him, working with 𝗕𝗹𝗵𝗶. But no, I think definitely one of those two. I think it'd be a real shame if he goes to a Saudi Arabia from now.
Yeah.
I think that would kind of be a real slowdown of momentum over
it would
the
feel
last
like an
2
anticlimax sort
years.
of thing.
Yeah. I mean, the Juventus one, it feels like he's more injured now than the fact he's got a ban, which is, I guess, is a better thing than being known for being banned, I guess. But no, I'd say definitely should try and go back to France in some capacity.
Going off that PSG point, as you said, they've lost Mbappe, lost Neymar, lost Messi. They are kind of missing a superstar, and kind of, I think if you were to build a team around Paul Pogba, I mean, yes, he's been out of football for 18 months, but like you don't lose that natural talent. You do, obviously you lose the fitness and stuff. But if you were to build a team around Pogba and kind of he fits into PSG's new philosophy of like France focus, things like that. Midfield of him and 𝗕𝗲𝗵𝗶, I think that would be fantastic. I think something else that could be quite interesting is, I don't know, like a Barcelona kind of. I'd like to see him go to a club that's kind of, he can win things, like kind of, because he is such a fantastic footballer, and kind of his loyalty to Man United kind of screwed him over a bit, kind of going back, and then kind of, he won a Europa League and things like that, but it was never kind of, it never felt like he was celebrated. And so I think going to a club like that, I think that would be a nice end to his career. Yeah,
and I think the ban also comes at a time where it will take off a lot of the wages, perhaps, that he might have been asking for now, because he's going to have, as I say, that slowdown of momentum. He's not necessarily got the bargaining power he once had of being one of the best players in Europe. A lot of talk has gone when it comes to Pogba. It feels like he's almost retired.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that he can stay in the fold. And I think a late career revival sounds a bit harsh because he's had such a good career.
Yeah.
He's not necessarily reviving anything. He's more just coming back to the game. But I think you could definitely see him potentially going to one of the Spanish teams, as you say, Barcelona, maybe even a Real Madrid, if things go well.
Yeah.
Things go wrong, I just hope that he retires early and just enjoys his life rather than trying to find a place in European football for himself. And
like if he was to kind of drop down the leagues, it would kind of be a bit of a shame.
I think he's got so much talent that he'll never find himself obviously playing for, let's say, a bad side. But I think the problem will be that he'll go to a club and not perform well and receive hate. And I don't think at this point in his career, after what he's gone through with the ban and everything, I don't think that's necessarily would be the best option for him.
What he needs. Yeah, 100%. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, leave a comment, send your questions in, and remember, get behind the ball.